Hi everyone, first off I want to say thanks to all the people who've already subscribed. If you haven't already, go ahead, hit that button down below, you know the drill given how people always bang on about it. Anyway, got a bit of a follow-up video for you here. About 6 months ago I made a video about using diesel to flush out a load of sludge from a Daihatsu's engine, which was quite an impressive level of gunge after the car had been sitting for more than a decade. Well, this attracted quite a few comments from people over whether it would still leave a lot of this contamination behind, even with doing multiple oil and filter changes. So now that the car has been run for several hundred miles and given a good workout, I'm going to send a sample of the used oil off to be analysed and see what's in there, whether it's showing evidence of there still being a lot of crud in the system. So follow along with me and we'll see what we find out. So to do this, what I did is I ordered this kit from a company called the Oil Lab. If you've heard of Blackstone Labs in the US, this is a very similar service here in the UK. And what they provide you is they give you a syringe and some pipe, which is to get down your dipstick tube for sucking oil out. And then they give you a little bottle which you put the sample in this and send it off to them, and they'll do an analysis and send a report back to you telling you what state your oil's in. So let's give that a try. First thing we're going to do, we're going to warm the engine up to get it up to temperature, make sure the oil's circulated and well mixed, and then we'll stop the engine, take a sample and see what condition they tell me it's in. Right, there we go, that's the engine starting to warm up now. That's all we need, just a bit of temperature in it. So now we can switch it off and see about giving a sample. Right, so here's what we do. So get the dipstick out the way, and then we need our pipe like this. So that's going down the dipstick tube. We need our syringe. There you go, that's our oil sample. Need our bottle. There you go. Now, I'm going to take this up to help seal it. Well, I'll also mention the reason that it's better to do it like this and draw it up through the dipstick tube is twofold. The first reason is that it means you can do a sample without having to drain your oil if all you're looking to do is do a quick inspection in the middle of service. The second thing is that it avoids contamination from dirt on the sump or on the sump plug as you drain it, or indeed dirt in your drain bottle. And lastly, I'm going to be draining this and I'm going to be using a flush. And if I'm sending an oil sample, I want to send them oil. I don't want to send them oil with flush in it. I want to send them just the oil to see what that's like. Otherwise it'll be contaminated and it might false flag something and say, hey, this is full of chemicals, what's going on? So that's the reason. Take your sample as an actual sample from your dipstick tube, not from your bucket, and certainly not after you've been using an engine flush in it. They also include this label where you put all your details on, the reference for your label, so telling you what it is, what oil you've got, reference for the car, and then you put that around the bottle before sending it off to them. There's my oil sample, that's what we got for them. That's going to go in my tub to send to them, and I'll take this off, post it off, and we'll see what they say. So we're going to do a drain now. Got some engine flush here. A couple of people in my comments seem to really like this stuff, so we'll give it a try, see how good a job it does. So we'll fill the engine with flush, run it up to temperature, drain the oil out, and see what state we think it's in.
gone under the car to drain the oil, I just want to show you the main reason I didn't simply drop the sump to clean it out. It's rather effectively blocked in by the subframe assembly, and the access to everything is a bit poor, frankly. Not ideal, but such is life. Either way, I drained out the old oil, which flowed out just fine, and nothing nasty in the bottom of the drain tub when I poured it out. Just a few bits of crud that got brushed off the exhaust and subframe while I was under the car. I swapped out the oil filter for a new one and then refilled with fresh oil. So all that's left to do now is have a look at the report from the oil analysis. Right at the top, as you can see, they've given me a caution flag for something that could be worth looking into. And in the detail underneath, this is in reference to the amount of iron they've detected in the sample. But they say it's not a major concern, and I'll discuss that when we get through to the various aspects of the analysis in a minute, in particular where they mention it could be from the crank. I'll warn you, this could be something of a dry subject for some, but if you're interested, let's get going. In this section, they look at how the oil is standing up physically, first off with the kinematic viscosity measurement, basically how well it flows. They're saying this is 57.4 centistrokes, which, if we look at a graph of the viscosity against temperature for the oil I was using, you can see is pretty much right on the money. They also report that the oil has no water contamination, and there is only 0.1% TIM, total insoluble matter, which indicates the oil isn't being contaminated with carbon and soot from combustion. There's a couple of NAs in this section, one for fuel contamination and one for total base number, which relates to the oil's resistance to acidity. Nothing suspicious here, it's simply that they haven't tested for these factors on the service I requested, as it would have increased the cost noticeably. Next, we move on to the analysis proper, and right at the top we see the iron content that they highlighted as noteworthy. This can be from wear and tear on any iron and steel components in the engine, of which there are obviously quite a few. In theory, any rust in there would also be indicated by this. Now, they flagged this at 61 parts per million. The lower limit they do that is 50, but at that stage it's more just to indicate that you want to have a check on it rather than it being actively a problem. Its levels getting up to 100 to 200 parts per million, that's when it starts becoming more of a concern. And given what this engine's been brought back from in terms of neglect, I'm happy enough to take this as being okay. The second element is chromium, and there's nothing really to remark on here at 1 part per million. Their guidance is that it's 30 parts per million as the limit of acceptability. Aluminium at 11 parts per million I'd assume is mainly coming from the pistons, but again, far below the 20 parts per million level that would flag a warning on the report, so I'm not at all concerned there. Molybdenum is an interesting one in that they don't actually offer any guidance as to when they'd warn you it was getting high, but at 1 part per million, safe to say it isn't, so it's a moot point. Copper and lead both show 10 parts per million, far below the warning level of 50. My assumption would be that these are fractional amounts of bearing wear, and that's similar with the tin content, which at 1 part per million is negligible. Again, I'm not at all concerned. Nickel content is showing a 0, which is obviously fine, though that's an interesting one for me, as you'll recall they said they put the iron content they measured down to the crank. Now, I think they're working on the principle that the crank is cast iron, but I believe it might in fact be steel, in which case I'd have thought you'd see some nickel from wear there as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to say that the iron levels in the oil could be from the block itself, and maybe some very slight corrosion from being sat so long, which has been cleared out into the oil. Silicon is probably just from dirt relating to the horrible old clogged air filter before I made my new one. And while 20 parts per million is right on the edge of what they'd flag a warning for, now that I've got a nice clean air filter in there, I'm not going to get worked up about it. Sodium and boron could come from coolant, but at the levels found, there's nothing to remark on, as 2 and 4 parts per million compares to levels of 50 and 100 respectively for being flagged as concerning. Vanadium is another 0 measurement, so nothing to say there. But you'll see that on the next lines the numbers leap up massively for the levels found of calcium, phosphorus, zinc and magnesium. However, these, along with barium, are noted in the report as being common additives that are used in oil manufacture, so them being present in the sample isn't at all unusual, and as such it's not been flagged in the slightest. So, there you have it. Other than a small amount of iron, after several months and hundreds of miles of use, there's nothing in the engine oil to really indicate a contamination issue, and given the condition it was in when I got it, I'm more than happy with that. Sure, it's possible there could be something nasty still lurking in some internal recesses, but I'm certainly not worried enough to start a dismantling session in order to investigate that, and if it's something that raises its head in the future, I'll address it then. Anyway, bit of a long one this, but hopefully at least some people have found it interesting or useful, and I'll see you again for the next video.